AJ, during the past 2 weeks, I've been trying to make lists with which Maggie suggested what I was angry about, and I rarely feel angry. I might feel the mild irritation, and then what I was fearful about. And I managed to write some things down, and they generally come out to things like isolation or lack of purpose in my life, or just things that really. When I looked at the list, I thought, oh, for heaven's sake, smarten up and stop being so self-centered. And that's sort of where, or self-absorbed, and that's sort of where I stop. And I'm not sure what I'm doing at that point.
Let's just write down your words. Smarten up.
Yeah.
Stop being self-centered.
Yeah.
Self-absorbed or self-centered.
Yeah.
Any other judgments you had?
I think being indulgent. I think self-indulgent.
Stop being indulgent.
Yeah.
Indulgent. Indulgent.
G-E-N-T.
Indulgent. Okay. What are they?
Judgments.
When you judge yourself, you will always prevent causal emotion. And when you judge others, by the way, that's exactly what you're trying to do to others too. Prevent their causal emotion. Right? So the truth is that every time we have one of these judgments, there is something inside of this. So let's look at Smarten Up. How many times were you told that when you were little?
I don't remember. I don't remember very much about
your childhood.
About my early childhood, no.
Exactly. I'd suggest you've been told it quite frequently. Right?
Yeah. Well, I know emotion wasn't encouraged.
Yes.
Expression of emotion wasn't encouraged.
And if you felt like you disappointed any of your parents, what generally happened?
I don't know. I can't remember.
Can't remember. Exactly. So start with the current thing. So many of you can't remember your childhood, right? Forget about trying to remember your childhood. Start with your law of attraction right now with regard to these emotions, right? The law of attraction right now is you're telling yourself to smarten up, right? That is a judgment of yourself. So why would you judge yourself? Let yourself feel about why. Does that feel like you're not smart? How do you feel about yourself, remember? So let's just rub the yourself out here. How I feel about myself. So ask yourself, with regard to when I say the words to myself, smarten up, how do I feel about myself?
Well, I guess that I'm not either smart or not using the brains that I have, or I'm not making good choices of use of my time or whatever.
And many your generation, by the way, used to get cuts or get a ruler across your hand at school if you weren't smart enough, right? You didn't know the answer there on tap, bang.
Oh, I can remember having to go around like classroom in grade 5 looking at everybody's handwriting because mine was so terrible. You know?
So the teacher got you and led you around. See, that's another person better than you. That's another person better than you. These kind of things happen to you all the time, right, in your childhood. That's another person. What does this do to you inside of you? It's like smarten up, like this constant message. And what we finish up doing is, because we don't release the event of that, we then perpetuate the same damage against ourselves. So this actually saying to yourself, smarten up, is actually the result of some very strong childhood conditioning that occurred to teach you that under certain conditions you're not very clever.
And I know within myself now as an adult, like I treat that as kind of a joke.
Yeah, and it's not a joke.
No, it probably wasn't a joke.
This is a very, very damaging self-projection now. You're actually now re-damaging yourself with this same projection because it's unhealed from the childhood. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. All right, let's look at this. Stop being self-centered. So what you're really saying is you're self-centered. Can you see that?
Well, by spending so much time on trying to deal with your own situation when there are a lot of people out there that, you should be. And I think this is a Christian thing too, isn't it? That
keep going, keep
very
going.
Much
you're actually
that you suppress your own needs because there are lots of other people that need something much more than you do.
Can you see where this is leading you? See, just by talking about, why am I thinking I'm self-centered here, just by even speaking about it, you're starting to go down to these beliefs about yourself if you do something for yourself.
That you're not really worthy to spend the time on.
So how am I seeing myself? I'm not worthy to spend this time on, because if I spend this time on, I've got this judgment going on that I'm self-centered. Now, that judgment had to come from somewhere. A little child who's 3 having a tantrum in the middle of the floor doesn't feel they're self-centered, do they? They might be self-centered, but they don't feel they are in that particular moment, do they? They just feel their emotion, and if they feel it completely, often it will pass in half an hour, 20 minutes, even 10 minutes, and it's gone, right? So whenever you're saying to yourself, stop being whatever, there's a judgment straight away there. So stop being indulgent. What's this one about?
I think it's probably the same sort of thing.
That if you spend a lot of time dealing with something inside of yourself to make yourself feel happier or better, that's self-indulgent. You've got to spend more time helping other people, less time on yourself.
Yeah.
Yep. And can you see where we finished up going with this if we really get intense with this? When we really get intense with this, you'll forget about yourself completely, and you'll do as much as you can for every other person on the planet other than yourself. You will get to that point. But the sad part of that is it creates lots of anger and rage and everything within ourselves. And it comes from how I see myself in the end. I see myself as being indulgent as soon as I do anything for myself.
I can see that being part of relationships I've had in the past too, with men particularly, I think, and that was, I would see more clearly how they felt and then act on that rather than what they were doing to me.
Yes.
And how I felt.
Major problem in relationships, isn't it? All right, now all of these things are judgments that come from a fear. Can you see how these would be related to some kind of fears? So the Smarten Up judgment comes from the fear that you're not that clever, right? The self-centered judgment comes from a fear that you actually are self-centered, right? The stop being indulgent judgment comes from a fear that you are indulgent.
Yeah, and maybe I think that I am those things.
You definitely do think you are, otherwise you would never have said these things to yourself.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? The words coming out of your mouth even, or the thoughts coming out of your mind towards yourself are proof that you have these fears inside of yourself. Does that make sense? Yes. Now, every one of those fears covers a causal emotion. So what would the fear that you're dumb and silly cover inside of yourself?
I don't know. Maybe that it's true. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Definitely.
So that I'm not smart.
You believe you're not smart, yes. And in fact, it would be good for me to say to you, you're not smart.
Oh, and maybe I'd say, maybe you're right.
And you would say, maybe you're right, right?
Yeah.
Because that's
You're
your
probably
own
right.
belief about yourself. What I'm saying is that from God's perspective, you're as smart as anybody else, but that belief isn't ever going to enter you while this other belief is present within you. Does that make sense? It's never going to get there. You can't have the truth and error in the same place from an emotional perspective. So what that means is inside of your soul, while you have this fear inside of you that you are actually stupid.
But I don't believe I'm stupid.
No, but then why would you tell yourself smarten up?
Well, just because how I'm handling my behavior, I think.
So how are you handling your behaviour?
In a self-indulgent, self-centered way.
Okay, well let's look at self-centered then. So you believe you're self-centered, do you not?
Probably, yeah.
You believe you're self-centered when you focus on dealing with your emotions, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you're out there helping everybody else, you're no longer believing you're self-centered.
Yeah, but I don't think I'm helping everybody else very much.
That's the addiction. Yeah. Can you see how the addiction kicks in? if I have a belief inside of me that maybe I am self-centered if I deal with my own emotions, can you see straight away that that's going to prevent me from dealing with my own emotions? It's going to actually make me go into the addiction, which is, okay, I can't deal with my own emotions, I'm better helping somebody else, so I'll go and help somebody else, and then I come home feeling really good. Oh, that was great, didn't feel good, you know.
Yeah.
And can you see how the addiction works? Like, the addiction is, I feel great when I'm helping somebody else, but if I start to deal with my own emotions, I feel terrible. Because I've got all these judgments of, oh, I'm self-centered if I deal with my own emotions. I'm indulgent if I deal with my own emotions. I've got to smarten up. What does smarten up mean? I've got to give more to others and less to myself. That's what it means in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore that's what it means in your feelings, in your soul.
But at the present time, I'm just stuck because I'm not doing either.
Well, you're stuck because you're not acknowledging that these are truths that you believe about yourself. When I say truths, they're not God's truth about yourself, but they are things you do actually feel about yourself deep in here. And I need to acknowledge them before they'll start to actually flow. Before they'll start to be dealt with, I need to acknowledge them. Does that make sense?
I guess so, yeah.
So what's happening is, listen to your own language, like about yourself, and your own language to others. Your language tells you a lot about your emotions, your true emotions, right? And be honest about your true emotions. So I've got this emotion that I've got to smarten up because I'm being selfish. So I do feel that at some level I am selfish. I've at least been condemned as being selfish at some point in the past, and I need to release that emotion. When I release that emotion, I'll no longer feel I'm selfish, and ironically, that's the time that I'll give the most to other people, because I'm no longer having this terrible thing that happens every time I do something for myself kick in. You see, most of the time what happens is that somebody says something to me, and because I've not healed the emotion inside of myself, I then want to either defend what they've said to me, or I want to justify that it's not true, and straight away that's an unloving act. I'm straight away in an unloving situation because I'm now projecting at that person. I'm now making that person believe something or that they already don't believe. I'm trying to change their mind. That's an unloving act too. At the end of the day, I need to get back to myself, all right? How do I feel about their condemnation of me? Let myself feel. In your case, you're condemning yourself. And by the way, this is what we've been taught to do. All of us have been taught to condemn yourself. From the time of your childhood onwards, you've been taught to condemn yourself so much that now even your parents may be dead, and yet you still play the same message to yourself that they played to you when they were alive. That's how powerful this conditioning has been. Right? And we need to undo it by looking at how we see ourselves and feel that emotion. When we feel that emotion, it releases from us. When it releases from us, the truth about ourselves can enter us. God's truth I'm talking about ourselves can enter us. But only when we release the emotion. So while you have an emotion that if I feel my emotions and I focus on my emotions and I'm being self-centered, that's going to prevent divine truth from entering you. Does that make sense? As soon as I get through that emotion that maybe I am self-centered, start reflecting upon, what you have learned through your life when you've been accused of being self-centered and all those kind of things. Let yourself start feeling about these events, release those events from you. You'll get to a point where you realise, hey, I'm not self-centered at all. Now, that at this stage, that's here, but it certainly isn't here, because if it was here, you wouldn't even say that to yourself.
Yeah, I don't remember being told that, and probably I was, but I don't remember.
Doesn't really matter what you remember. Start with what you've currently got. What you've currently got is yourself attacking yourself. Yeah. So let yourself feel the attack and see it as actually there's something in every one of these statements. Like, does God feel you're indulgent when you're feeling your feelings? What do you think? Didn't God create you to feel your feelings? Yeah. So therefore God doesn't feel you're indulgent when you're feeling them. In fact, what you'll get to a stage when you're at one with God, you'll feel every feeling you have every moment. And it won't be indulgent at all.
Okay.
So there has to be some judgment going on here that's related to a fear, that's related to a fear of some belief that maybe that is true. Maybe you are self-centered. And a lot of these beliefs are totally erroneous, but they're not going to leave you all of your life until you feel them. And that's the issue we face. It's not until we feel that perhaps we are self-centered and even go deeper and look at all the times we were told we were self-centered and allow ourselves to feel about some of the causal events eventually. You will remember these things as you go deeper into it. But if you don't allow yourself to even see the judgment, you'll never get to the deeper emotion. So when you said these things to me just before, you believed these things to be true about yourself.
Well, that certainly was stopping me from proceeding with my list.
Yep.
Yes, okay, thank you.
And you mean your emotional list there, do you? Or your to-do list or your desire list?
My list of what made me angry or what made me fearful or whatever. Yeah.
Can I also point out that all of those things will stop you having desire? Can you see why?
Because that's being self-indulgent too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that definitely is because I'm very unfocused in my life now and don't really know what I want to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the reason why is you're shutting down your desire by having all of these judgments about desire, your own desire. The irony is that when you have your desire in a pure manner without addictions, you will find actually that is the time you are also the most loving. That's the conundrum of desire, is that when God created, in fact, I'll be talking soon about the law of desire, and the law of desire is such a powerful thing to understand because God created you to have desire, and if you don't have desire, right, that actually causes a lot of your law of attraction to be very negative. It's your desire that creates very positive laws of attraction, right? So whenever you don't feel a desire, or you feel like your desire is suppressed, or you feel like you don't have any desires at all, look at the emotional programming you have about self-indulgence and being selfish and self-centered and all that kind of stuff. Because that all prevents you from having desire. And God created you to have desire, all sorts of desires, right? Physical, like you would not eat without desire, would you?
Yeah, but I do eat.
Okay, so you have some desire at least, right? Now, what about sex? Do you have sex?
Oh, I'm not married. I'm well, no, I'm a recent widow. No, I don't.
Okay. Just a no would be fine. Yeah, and so there's a whole area of desire there that's been turned off, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So there's that to look at. Why? There's some judgment. One of the judgments was I'm not married. That's a judgment against having this desire. So look at the desires and ask you. And what about emotional desires? What desires do you have there? When you get up in the morning and the first thing you feel, what do you feel?
Once I get out of bed, I'm okay. I keep going.
You keep going.
Yeah.
Is that a desire, or is that just?
Oh, I have a desire to keep busy. I think that's
not a desire.
No, well, but it gets.
That's an addiction.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sort of messed up around.
Can you see if you can work your way through these emotions, you would then allow your desires to be more present, and if you allow your desires to be more present, you'll actually work your way through a lot of things that way.
Yeah.
Okay, desire is really, really good like that. So allow yourself to have these desires. These things are what are turning off your desires. Yeah. So allow yourself to see why you're turning on detuning from your desires. So I don't do the same thing any day because my desires are different every day. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So every single day your desires will change. If you're in tune with them, they'll change and you'll have a desire to do all sorts of things. Now, how is that going to affect you in your life in this world? Well, obviously, if I go to work 5 days a week and I desire to only go to work one of those days, if I tune into my desire, I'll be not wanting to go to work the other 4 days. Now, my boss might go, you know, like, this person's not a very good worker anymore. They only rock up one day a week, right? And so I'll have to work my way through this issue of change, like the fact that I'm going to have to change my life. So a lot of times we detune from desire so that we do not have to act. We detune from desire because we don't want to change. We don't want change. We're afraid of it. My suggestion is to come to love change. You want to love change because you don't want to live in a desireless world. Everything you want to do will be desire in the future. So whenever you find yourself doing something because you have to, just stop. Like, you need to stop. And everyone goes, that's not very practical, you know. Like, in the course of one day, I'm working for a boss and, you know, he's wanting me to do this and that, and half the time I don't want to do any of what he's saying, right? Well, then you've got to look at your reason, your addiction to staying in that job that causes you to do things you don't desire. And what might the addiction be? It might be, I'm addicted to money, a regular income stream. So therefore I'm addicted to security. I need to deal with a lot of security-based emotions. If I just leave the job, do you think those emotions will come up? Pretty rapidly. But I could even stay in the job and start dealing with them, couldn't I? But I need to acknowledge that they're present and there, that I have a fear of security that causes me to be addicted to working, and that causes me to deny what I desire on an almost hourly basis. Does that make sense? So allow myself to, you can change this. You can change this by no longer being afraid of being unsafe, which means I'm going to have to deal with a lot of feelings about my lack of safety. Also, I might have a lot of feelings about God's not going to look after me. Like, that's a lack of safety, isn't it? Like, so in other words, I feel God created this entire universe, right? This entire universe we have, God created. And I believe that in creating all of that, God doesn't have the power to look after me. Does that really make sense emotionally? Well, of course, you know, from an emotional perspective, of course, if God created the entire universe, then God must have the power to look after me. Like, we were driving along the road the other day out in the desert, right? And this whole flock of budgerigars just flew off the ground into the... Now, we were out in the desert, like it was like bleak, you know, no water seemingly, and yet these like 30 or 40 very healthy budgerigars, wild budgies, just flew up into a tree. Now, how did they get looked after? Obviously, something's going on there. God has the power to look after everything that God's created if it works in harmony with God's laws, right? So if that's the case, then one of my core causal emotions is going to be, I can't rely on God. God's totally unreliable. God's not going to look after me. God's totally unreliable. She's not going to care for me. She's not going to care for my material needs. AJ, it's totally impractical for you to believe that God's going to look after me and my food requirements. But God created everything to look after you and your food requirements. It's only that we get into disharmony. So that'll be a core emotion that I need to work my way through as well. If I follow my desire and passion, I won't get looked after, is what many of us believe. So what we do instead is we focus on doing something to look after ourselves, right? That is nothing to do with our passion. The irony is, if you focused on doing something in your passion, you'll get lots and lots of abundance in that moment. That's why, you know, most of the richest people on the planet all began by doing something they really enjoyed. Many of them were broke before then. Right? And the reason why is desire is powerful. When you focus on what you really desire to do, everything starts coming to you, particularly if you start putting it into practice with God's laws or in amongst God's laws. So for all of us, look at this area of desire. If you can focus on the area of desire in your life, it will definitely trigger every one of your addictions. Right? So everything that you've become addicted to that stops you from feeling your desires, or that causes you to feel that you're not allowed to have them, or that causes you to believe that you're not going to survive if you decide to follow them, all of those emotions will be dealt with if you allow that. See how you go with that.
Thank you.